Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with our latest stories.
Evelyn had just settled into her usual Sunday morning routine, a cup of coffee in one hand, her tablet in the other, when her phone buzzed on the counter. She almost ignored it, assuming it was another promotional email or a reminder for an event she had no intention of attending. But when she glanced at the screen, her heart lurched. Rachel. Hey Evie. James is back in town. He wants to see you. Are you open to it? For a moment, the world seemed to slow. James. The name alone sent a current of emotions racing through her: curiosity, dread, nostalgia, and something deeper she refused to name. It had been a year since their divorce, and she had done everything in her power to rebuild, to convince herself that she had moved on. But had she? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What did James want? An apology? Closure? Or did he regret leaving? 1,000 questions swirled in her mind, each one more unsettling than the last. Evelyn exhaled slowly, willing her pulse to steady. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she typed her reply. I'm open to it. Let's see how it goes. And just like that, the past was knocking at her door again. The days leading up to their meeting felt like a slow, unraveling thread, each moment tugging Evelyn further into memories she had spent a year trying to forget. She told herself it was just curiosity, nothing more, a chance to gain closure, to prove to herself that she had moved on. But the truth was far messier. Beneath the surface of her carefully constructed life, a quiet storm had been brewing. On the day of the meeting, Evelyn stood before her mirror, scrutinizing her reflection. She had chosen a soft navy blouse, something effortless yet put together. Her hair was styled just enough to seem like she hadn't tried. But deep down, she knew better. The nervous energy in her hands, the extra glance at her reflection, the way she kept telling herself this was nothing at all betrayed her. The cafe was warm and familiar, the hum of conversation blending with the scent of fresh coffee. And then, there he was, James. He looked different, his hair slightly longer, his stance more at ease, but his eyes, those same deep-set eyes that once held every secret between them, locked onto hers. He smiled. Wow, Evie, you look amazing. And just like that, time folded in on itself. As their conversation unfolded, Evelyn found herself caught between the past and the present. At first, it was lighthearted updates on work, shared memories of places they once visited, the inevitable small talk that felt like a safe barrier between them. But beneath the surface, an undercurrent of tension rippled through every exchanged glance, every pause that lasted just a second too long. James was the first to break the illusion. His voice softened, hesitant yet deliberate. I've been thinking about us, Evie, about everything. Evelyn's grip tightened around her coffee cup. She had expected this, had told herself she was prepared, but hearing it out loud unraveled something inside her. She met his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. James? I know, he interrupted gently. I know we made our choices, and I don't want to make this harder. I regret the way things ended. A sharp pang of emotion twisted in her chest. She had spent a year convincing herself she had let go, that their story had closed. But in that moment, staring into the eyes of the man she once loved, Evelyn realized something terrifying. Perhaps she had only been pretending to move on. Evelyn stood in front of her mirror, smoothing the fabric of her blouse with unsteady hands. It was just a gathering, just a casual night out with friends. And yet, the thought of seeing James in a different setting, outside the carefully controlled environment of their one-on-one conversations, sent a nervous flutter through her chest. She had spent the past year rebuilding herself, carefully piecing together the fragments of a life that no longer revolved around him. So why did the prospect of being around him, in the presence of others, feel so dangerously uncertain? When she arrived at the restaurant, laughter and the low hum of conversation filled the space. Rachel greeted her with a knowing smile, nudging her toward the group. And there he was, James, leaning against the bar, mid-laugh, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The sight was both familiar and foreign, a painful reminder of what once was. Then she noticed Natalie beside him, the way she leaned in slightly, her laughter soft and effortless. Evelyn clenched her jaw against the unexpected pang of jealousy. It wasn't her place to feel this way. And yet, as James turned and met her gaze, the air between them thickened. The past was no longer distant, it was standing right in front of her. Evelyn had spent so much time convincing herself that she was over James, that she had moved beyond the pain of their past. But seeing him with Natalie had cracked something open inside her, something raw and unsettled. The jealousy she felt gnawed at her, relentless and unwelcome. She hadn't expected to care, hadn't wanted to care, but she did. The night played out like a carefully orchestrated performance. She laughed when she was supposed to, nodded in the right places, and avoided James's gaze for as long as she could. But every time Natalie touched his arm or whispered something that made him smile, Evelyn felt her composure slipping. She tried to remind herself of the truth: she had chosen to let him go. And yet, watching him now, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost something irreplaceable. Later, as she stepped outside for air, the cool night breeze stinging her skin, she heard footsteps behind her. "Evelyn," James said, his voice careful, uncertain. She turned, bracing herself. "Are you okay?" She forced a smile. "Of course, why wouldn't I be?" But the look in his eyes told her he wasn't convinced. And deep down, neither was she. Evelyn had spent the entire day trying to suppress the gnawing feeling in her chest. But it clung to her like a shadow. No matter how much she told herself that James was free to move on, that Natalie had every right to be in his life, the jealousy sat there, simmering beneath the surface. She hated it, hated that, after everything, he still had this kind of hold over her. That evening, she called Rachel, needing to talk to someone who wouldn't let her spiral. They met at their favorite rooftop bar, a place Evelyn had once loved for its glittering city views. But tonight, the skyline felt distant, blurred by the whirlwind in her mind. "I saw them together," she admitted, swirling the untouched drink in her hand. Rachel arched a brow. "And?" Evelyn sighed. "And it was harder than I expected." Rachel studied her for a moment before setting down her glass. "Be honest with yourself, Eve. Do you still have feelings for him?" Evelyn opened her mouth, ready to deny it, but the words didn't come. Because deep down, she knew the answer, and it terrified her. Evelyn had always believed she was in control of her emotions. But the moment she saw James again, that illusion shattered. The air between them was thick with something unspoken, something she wasn't ready to name. They had met up under the guise of just catching up. But every glance, every pause in conversation, carried a weight neither of them could ignore. They sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, the hum of conversation around them fading into the background. James looked at her the way he used to, like she was the only person in the room. It was unnerving. "I don't want to mess things up," he finally said, his voice steady but hesitant. Evelyn forced a smile, though her hands trembled slightly as she lifted her coffee cup. "We're just talking, James." He studied her, his eyes dark with something unreadable. "Is that really all this is?" The question hung between them, dangerously close to pulling them back into something she wasn't sure she could handle. Her heart pounded as she realized she had two choices: keep pretending she was over him, or admit that the past still had a grip on her, and she wasn't sure which terrified her more. Evelyn had convinced herself that rebuilding a friendship with James was the right choice, that keeping things light and casual would keep old wounds from reopening. But as she sat in his car, parked outside her apartment in the dim glow of streetlights, she realized how fragile that illusion had been. They had spent the evening laughing, sharing stories, and slipping back into the comfortable rhythm they once had. It felt safe until now. A quiet tension filled the space between them, thick with all the things they weren't saying. James had his hands on the steering wheel, gripping it just a little too tightly, while Evelyn's fingers fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. "I had a great time tonight," he said, his voice softer than before. "Me too," she replied, forcing herself to look at him. For a moment, he just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "Evelyn, do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't let go?" Her breath hitched. She could lie, pretend she had never thought about it. But the truth was, she did wonder, all the time, and now, she wasn't sure if she could keep pretending otherwise. The weight of their past pressed against Evelyn as she sat across from James in the dimly lit cafe. The world outside moved on as if nothing had changed. But inside, everything between them felt different, heavier. Unspoken words lingering in the air like an unfinished sentence. "I don't want to ruin what we have now," James said, stirring his untouched coffee. His voice was steady, but she could see the way his fingers tensed around the spoon. "But I also don't want to pretend that I don't still feel something for you." Evelyn swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She had told herself that they were just friends, that their rekindled connection was nothing more than nostalgia wrapped in comfort. But the way he was looking at her now, like she was the only person in the world, shattered that illusion. "I don't know what to do with this, James," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Then let's figure it out together." Her breath hitched. She had spent so long protecting herself from this moment. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop running and finally face what had been there all along. The evening breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine as Evelyn and James strolled through the quiet park. Their fingers brushing every so often, as if testing the waters of something fragile yet undeniable. The tension that once hung between them had softened into something gentler and understanding. An unspoken promise that they were no longer shackled by their past but stepping into something new. Together. James stopped beneath the glow of a street lamp, turning to face her fully. His eyes, filled with a warmth that reached straight into her soul, searched hers. "I've thought about this for so long," he said, his voice steady, filled with certainty, "and I don't want to waste any more time pretending I don't know what I want." Evelyn's heart pounded as he took her hands in his. She had spent so long guarding herself, afraid of repeating the past, of losing herself again in something she couldn't control. But standing there, looking at James, the man who had hurt her, yes, but who had also grown, who had fought his way back into her life, she realized she wasn't afraid anymore. With a deep breath, she smiled. "Neither do I. Life is full of second chances, but they require growth, honesty, and a willingness to move forward without repeating past mistakes. Relationships, whether romantic, familial, or friendships, thrive on communication, trust, and effort from both sides. If you find yourself at a crossroads like Evelyn and James, ask yourself, have you truly healed? Have you learned from the past? If so, don't let fear hold you back from something real. However, if doubts linger, take your time. Self-respect and emotional well-being should always come first. Love, when nurtured with patience and sincerity, can lead to something even stronger than before.